Hey everybody, it's Sino. Before the video gets started, I just wanted to thank you all for all of your support. We hit 9,500 subscribers a few days ago, and we have 10,000 right around the corner. So remember that when we do hit 10,000, I'm going to be doing my face reveal on this channel. Let me know what you guys think of the story in the comment section down below, and if you enjoyed the story, remember to leave a like, and if you're new, consider subscribing. Starting this Friday, May 26th, I'm going to start uploading daily videos to this channel featuring scary stories from Reddit. I'll be finishing up finals this Thursday, May 25th, so after Thursday, I'll be free to start uploading daily videos featuring scary stories from Reddit. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you do, remember to leave a like and subscribe for daily videos starting Friday, May 26th. Thank you for all the support, and I hope you enjoyed the video.
This is an experience that has bothered me for years, so I felt I should finally post something about it in case it's helpful in some way. I used to live in a subdivision in the middle of nowhere north of Divide, Colorado. Our gravel street ended in a cul-de-sac, and we were the middle house of the three at the end of the street, which was on the side of a hill. Because we were pretty far away from anything, I was a latchkey kid and usually was home alone for a few hours after school. This took place in the early 80s when I was about 8 to 9 years old. One day, shortly after the bus dropped me off when I got home, I saw someone pull into the driveway. I didn't recognize him, so I hid behind our wood-burning stove in the corner. He came up and started insistently knocking on the door and looking in the window. He then strangely tried the doorknob. He just wouldn't stop knocking, so I came out thinking if this guy was a burglar and saw me, he would go away. When he saw me, he asked me, through the door which had a window pane, if I could open up the door, and I replied my dad was in the shower. He didn't react and said he was there to see my neighbors, mentioned them by name. I told him they lived next door in the house on the left. He said okay, seemed a bit frustrated, but started walking away to his car. But instead of getting in his car, he started walking around my house. The house was built on the side of a hill, so it had a walkout basement. I started freaking out because at this point this wasn't normal, and I thought he was going to try and get in through the sliding glass door in the basement, which was locked. I got ready to jet out the door and into the woods, but then I saw him come up the other side of the house, get into his car, and tear out of my driveway up the gravel road. He never did go to my neighbors, who he said he was looking for. Sobbing, I picked up the phone and called my neighbor halfway up the street, who had a son my age and used to watch me sometimes. She had seen the car speed up the gravel road and told me to come over, so I took off running through the woods to my neighbor's house, avoiding the road in case he turned around and came back. Of course I told my parents, but I don't really think they let it sink in, and since my neighbors weren't home, they said he probably mistook the house. From my standpoint, I'm pretty sure if I opened that door, I would not be here today. No one randomly drives down my street, much less into the subdivision in the middle of the mountains where I lived, and I never saw the guy at my neighbor's house. I vaguely remember one of my parents asking my neighbors if they knew the guy based on the description. Shorter white guy, round glasses, long brown hair slightly balding, and a longish beard. But they didn't know who that might be. I've always felt he knew I was there alone, based on his non-reaction to me saying my dad was in the shower. He knew the layout of the house, which is why he walked down the side of the house to the walkout basement. He preferred not to leave any physical evidence, which is why he didn't break in. Not sure if my parents knew him or not, but because of the remoteness of the location and the fact we often played in the woods, I'm pretty sure if I did get snatched, they would have chalked it up to me getting lost/hurt wandering around. We moved out of state a year or so later. Never heard of any other local kids go missing, but I can't believe that this guy didn't try to make someone else disappear.
I'm a 19-year-old female living in the UK. I was on my day off from work, as I work 6 days a week at a very unpopular delivery service called Yodel. My mom was out the night before, staying at my grandmother's house due to her being ill. I have two small dogs, both Chihuahua cross Yorkshire Terriers, who don't really need all that much walking. But this Sunday morning, I was feeling it. It was around 7:30 in the morning, which means it was still pretty dark out when I put their coats on and left the house. The local park is a 2-minute walk away from my house, which I had no problem getting to. So cut to about 10 minutes into my walk. I'm halfway around the park when I notice that it's brighter than usual. So I turn around and see a car parked in the parking lot of this park, with its lights on full beam directed straight at me. Now at this point, I'm starting to feel uneasy, as I was about to start making my way back there, as that is the way that I had entered the park. But something in my gut told me that it was an incredibly bad idea, so instead, I decided to cut across to the adjoining field and made my way across from there, as there was a public pathway running parallel to both fields. So cut to about 15 minutes later, and I'm starting to calm down, feeling like I had just overreacted to the whole situation. I get to the end of the public pathway. I've passed a few harmless people, and I'm feeling pretty stupid at this point. What I had forgotten was that the parking lot previously mentioned was just up the road, and the road I had come out at connected to it. As I was just about to turn off the public pathway back onto the main road, a car drives past me that, at first, didn't look particularly memorable until the passenger in the car drove past with the biggest, cruelest, most evil grin on his face as they passed me. I stopped in my tracks and they pulled up just down the road and waited. I started walking home double time, and the walk that would have taken me 20 minutes took me 10. And the entire walk home this car followed me. Thankfully, I had to cut through little alleyways to get to the road leading to the park, and I managed to lose them by the time I got to my house. After I'd caught my breath, I looked out my kitchen window carefully, without moving the blinds, to see 3 guys, in maybe their mid-20s, stalking around the area, presumably looking for me and my dogs. So, to you 3 creeps who have prompted me to change my dog walking routine, let's not meet.
In my lifetime, a lot of weird shit has happened to me. Because of my parents' job, I've practically grown up in a courtroom, and I can say that I've seen some messed up stuff. I can also say that I've almost become desensitized to some of these things. That's some background on this situation. Now to get to the story. I used to go onto Omegle and get the IP addresses of some old creeps that were under the filter children or kids. I would clearly say that I was a minor, and if they continued making lewd comments, trying to get me to do things or trying to expose themselves, I'd get their IP, send it to them, tell them where they lived, and say I was a simulated webcam used by the US government. Sometimes they'd laugh, sometimes they'd apologize, and sometimes they'd be scared shitless. I've encountered several of these guys before, but I can say that I'm very good at remembering faces. Fast forward to a few weeks later. I travel a lot, and I had just arrived in San Francisco, California. I went out to dinner with some family and friends at this popular restaurant. I sat down at the end of our table. It was one of those long tables that could seat plenty of people. There was another long table next to us. Now, I was sitting against the wall in the booth part. This gave me a great view of the whole restaurant. It didn't take long for me to realize that I was being watched. At the table next to us, there was a man, about 50 years old. He was sitting at the end of the table on the other side, so he was sitting diagonally from me. I thought he looked very familiar, and the guy was just grinning at me. I smiled politely, then looked down, hoping he'd stop. He didn't. I was starting to get uncomfortable. Why the heck was this guy staring at me, and why does he look so familiar? Then he spoke. "Hey there," he said softly. His voice was rough. I just looked back at him when it hit me. I had seen him on Omegle. But no, that's stupid. What are the odds of that? I just sat there, looking at him in total shock. He flashed me that creepy grin. At this point, my mother realized that something was wrong and asked what the problem was. I shook my head and the guy smiled at her. For the rest of the night, he continued to stare at me. A little while later, I got up to go to the restroom. In this restaurant, you either had to take an elevator or go around to the hotel next door to get upstairs to the restrooms. When I got to the elevator, I realized this guy was walking after me. He started to rush as soon as I climbed into the elevator. I pressed the close button and held it, praying it would close in time. Luckily, it did. As soon as I got out of the elevator, I ran to the restroom. I heard someone coming up the stairs, so I stood leaning against the door of the bathroom trying to listen. They stopped for a few minutes, then they started again, this time going back downstairs. I took in a breath and waited a bit before booking it back down. When I sat down, he smirked at me. I shot him a glare. Finally, the guy and his group got up to leave. Of course, this guy had to drop his fork. He told his friends that he'd be right there and that he'd meet up outside. He picked it up, looked me in the eyes, grinned, and said, "It was nice seeing you," then stood up and walked out. At the time, I just thought he was a major creep and that it was really weird that I had seen him on Omegle. Then I thought about it. This guy clearly remembered me. What if he had gotten on the elevator with me? It might have been nothing and it might not even seem like a big deal, but just looking into his eyes and seeing that grin, that was enough to give me chills. Anyway, I haven't been on Omegle since. My message to you reading this is to stay cautious and be careful if you go on sites like Omegle. You never know who you'll meet and what their intentions are. So creepy Omegle pedophile, let's not meet again.
I'm a 16-year-old girl, and as many teenagers, music is basically my life. I recently got new headphones which work very well, but I'm very clumsy and I broke a part of them. They still work, but I have to put my hands around my head to keep them in place. It takes me about 45 minutes to an hour to go home after school, which includes a tramway, a bus, and a bit of walking. I was really pissed about my headphones, so I thought that after taking the bus, I would play my music out loud on the street that leads to my house, knowing that there is usually no one taking the same way home as I do, aside from a girl who I don't know, but goes to the same high school as me. I really hoped that she wasn't taking the bus, so I could play music once I got off, but there she was. I have recently moved into a little village. I didn't know many places or streets to take instead of this one, which my father used to take by car. I thought it would be a bit longer, but I really didn't mind, so I just played my music. I quickly got bored because the sound coming out of my phone wasn't really loud. I put my headphones back on, even though I looked like a huge idiot holding them with my hands. As I got closer and closer to my house, I take a turn, and I see a man on the side of the road. He looked at me, threw something on the floor, and then walked to the middle of the road and stood there. I turned my music off and listened as he was saying things, though I couldn't understand much. He was staring and talking in my direction as I passed him. Being kind of creeped out by him, I looked behind me through my phone's reflection. He was following me, still talking. I walked a bit quicker. Then, I took the final turn and rushed into my house. I ran as fast as I could and locked myself in my house. I was home alone, so I quickly dialed the police number on my phone and had it ready, just in case. In the end, I didn't end up using it. Today, I saw some police cars going in that direction and learned that a little boy was reported missing. That's when it hits me. This wasn't the first time I saw that guy. One night after school, I was almost in front of my house when a hooded man ran away from the other side of the street. I clearly saw that he was staring at my house, which creeped me out. He had the same hood as the guy that followed me. Since then, I never go out without a small weapon. Please, be careful, even when you're close to home.
This story happened back in the late 90s when I was in 2nd grade. At the time, my uncle, my mom's younger brother, was enlisted in the U.S. Navy. Due to the nature of his job, he constantly traveled to other parts of the world. He was frequently stationed in different countries, sometimes for years at a time. Since he was usually so far away, my family did not get to see him very often. My mother and him were very close, and I had a special relationship with him as well. Every time he visited to a new place, he would send me a gift, a magic lamp from Saudi Arabia, castanets from Spain, rosary beads from Notre Dame, and so on. He was also a lot of fun, and I treasured the time that we spent together. This particular year, he received some time off and informed us he would come stay with us for the holidays. I was beyond thrilled to be seeing one of my favorite relatives. One day, while both my parents were at work, he decided to take my brother and I to a nearby mall. At the time, my brother was 12 and I was 7. We had a good time going to the various stores, getting lunch, and watching skateboarders at an indoor park. Although my uncle loved us dearly, I wouldn't exactly call him the most attentive babysitter. While the three of us were heading out, my brother and my uncle were much farther ahead of me. Both of them walked extremely fast and seemed to be engaged in their conversation. Being a very small girl for my age, combined with having Lyme disease, made it difficult for me to walk at their pace. As hard as I tried to catch up with them, I only seemed to be falling further behind. Suddenly, from the left side, I felt someone grab me. It happened in an instant, and my mind raced while trying to process what was happening. Looking up, I saw him. A face that I recall clear as day 20 years later. He was an old man, perhaps late 70s, but his face was horribly disfigured. All of his skin hung low and poured over his other features. What I remember most was his nose, which was more of a giant tumor so large that it covered his entire mouth. Looking back, it is now clear to me that he had elephant man disease. The man did not say anything to me. Instead, he crouched down to my level and put his face just inches in front of mine. Then he made the most intense eye contact I have ever experienced. Both of his hands were wrapped around my arms so tightly that I winced in pain. Abruptly, he began shaking me, as if forcing me to look at him. I was so paralyzed in fear that I could not make a sound. For some reason, I simply stood there, frozen, staring directly at him. While this was happening, the mall was by no means empty. People passed by, but they either didn't notice or didn't care. After about a minute, which seemed far longer, adrenaline got the better of me, and I violently wriggled from his grip. In tears, I moved as briskly as I could towards my uncle and brother. Luckily, the man did not follow me. By this time, my family members had finally realized that I was gone, and both turned around while I approached them. Their backs were to me during the entire encounter, so they had no idea what just occurred. I didn't say anything to either of them because I was afraid somehow I had done something wrong. When I got home, I had bruises from where the man had grabbed me. I hid them from my mom so I didn't have to explain what had happened. That incident left me so traumatized that the very same night I went vegetarian. In my 7-year-old mind, every time I looked at meat, I would think of that man's face and the way he had stared so intently at me. I would have nightmares that he was coming back for me and was petrified to go back to that mall for many years. Now that I am an adult, I look back and wonder what exactly transpired. Did he want to kidnap me? Was he tired of being ignored by society? Perhaps he had dementia? I will never know. Even though I have empathy and wish him well, I also take solace in the fact that we will probably never meet again. Disclaimer. In no way, shape, or form is my intention to speak ill of individuals who have any type of deformity or condition. This story is simply my recollection of an event that occurred when I was a child. Please keep this in mind in your comments, as I would never judge someone based on physical characteristics that they cannot control.